500 years ago, King Richard III was buried by Franciscan friars a few yards from here. His grave hurriedly dug, and a simple funeral without pomp would have been offered. Today, we are committing his mortal remains to the consecrated ground of this cathedral. Here in a cathedral, history meets the present. Here, eternity breaks into time.
My bones, scripted in light upon cold soil, a human braille. My skull, scarred by a crown, emptied of history. Describe my soul as incense, votive, vanishing. Your own the same. Grant me the carving of my name.
Josephine Day was not at all afraid to have Alan Grant handicapped, not in like the alcohol way or the broken marriage way, but in The Daughter of Time, he's in a hospital bed, a subject that Dana will talk about. So he's doing the whole investigation while basically trapped in bed. And in The Singing Stands, which Val and I hope to talk about, he's suffering from PTSD, but really intense claustrophobia, which bothers him and which he discusses quite candidly. So each of you have some thoughts about why Tay was so willing to put him out there as a basically fragile and flawed human being?
She had, like she lived through the First World War, and it's quite clear that she lost someone who was very close to her in the First World War. Another writer, a poet, he was a very good friend of hers. There's some suggestion that there may have been a romance there, but I'm not convinced by that at all. However, she carried that damage forward with her. It probably happened when she was at college, so she was at the other end of the country from her family support. So she went through that kind of experience, and she was a writer who very much brought her own experience to her work, and I think that's where her interest in that lay.
Sujata?
Gosh, I think that she didn't want to make him the star. Like, I noticed that in so many of the books I read, that these characters were so enchanting and so diverting, and you put a lot of emphasis into the characters, or my attention went to the characters. So I think that just those were the kind of stories that she wanted to tell, that were about a lot of people that had women in the forefront many times, the complexity and the hidden power of women. So it was good to have him, be the law, but not everything be focused on him.
And I was going to say that also the character of Marta Hallard, who is the actress who is in anybody else's novel would be Alan Grant's love interest, but the two of them have an entirely platonic relationship. And she, as in true actress form, steals the scene time and time again. When she comes in, when she enters the room, that's where your focus turns, exactly as you're saying, Sujata. A woman enters the scene and Tay gives her, front and center.
The Daughter of Time, I love because it stands so many crime fiction conventions on its head. And also because she opens with an indictment of crime fiction as it is being written. All of those titles, I am certain that the fictitious writers that she's writing, you're laughing, Val, I know you know what I'm talking about. All of those writers that she's talking about, that all the books that are on that have been brought to him as gifts to ease him through his, convalescence. He doesn't want to read any of them. He knows exactly what they're about. They're exactly about the same thing that the last 10 books that writer wrote about. He's just, it's just an utter and complete indictment. And I mean, it's no wonder she never joined the crime club. Holy cow. Then she stood all the, the Daughter of Time begins with Alan Grant flat on his bed, flat on his back in a hospital bed. And he teases out the solution to a crime that was committed 400 years before. There's no forensic evidence. There's no reliable narrators of the time because, naturally nobody's going to write anything that Henry VII is not going to approve of. It's just, I love The Daughter of Time because it was my introduction into crime fiction that I went on and read a whole bunch of other crime fiction that was not at all like The Daughter of Time. And it took a long time for me to realize just what she had done.
It's the ultimate cold case, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is.
And I think it's a particularly apposite novel for people to be reading at the moment, because here we are in the throes of COVID, many of us in varying stages of lockdown. And essentially, at one time or another over the last 9 months, I have found myself effectively in the position of Alan Grant. I can't go and do any research outside the house. I can't go and interview people because I'm not allowed to mix with people. And I'm sort of, I'm sitting here plonked down in front of my desk, and that's it. That's my resources. I mean, obviously, I have the internet at my fingertips, but that's not always much use to you when you're researching a cold case. And so I think that a lot of people will find echoes in this book right now of where they are in terms of, being cast back on your own resources.
Sujata, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just thinking that it's a really pleasurable thing to try to find a solution to an unsolved crime. Like recently I had that conversation with Nev March about her new book, Murder in Old Bombay, which is about a true crime. I've been fascinated by that crime for like 6 years. And so it's like unsolved, just weird things that that history says it's one thing, but there's evidence to show that maybe the written accounts are wrong. That's something that we all want to do, or a lot of us like. My son is obsessed with the truth about Michael Jackson. Like we think we know the truth about Michael Jackson, but he, likes the conspiracy theories so I just think that she taps into a very human instinct with this book.
Well,
And indeed, Colin Dexter just, ripped off the whole idea with The Wench is Dead, where he has Inspector Morse in the hospital bed solving a historic crime. And that's it's a straight lift from Josephine Tay. So it's, any idea, if you let it sit around long enough, somebody will pick it up and run with it as if it's their own idea.
Well, I think we should also remember, historically speaking, she didn't accept Shakespeare as the definitive portrait of Richard III, but she actually started a whole school of Ricardians, people, or at least she tapped into them, whether she didn't start them or not. Elizabeth Peters wrote, a follow-on book, but basically there was a whole rehabilitating, Richard III thing that took light. And I wonder, I haven't really paid that much attention, but since they spaded him up, in the parking lot or whatever it is, haven't they, Val, what's been the effect, maybe you're closer to it than we are. Is it confirmed Shakespeare or is it confirmed Josephine Tay?
Well, I think there's more of a sense of leading towards the Tay view of things. People do understand now that this case where very much history was written by the victors, and the people who needed their version of it to be accepted as the truth. And I think certainly there was no sense when when Richard III's body was discovered in the car park in Leicester. There was no sense of this should be treated as a disgraced object. It was, like there was sort of big discussions about where it should be reburied, reinterred, as a monarch, and not as a villain.
Another thing that she does in The Daughter of Time is the way Tay applies the skills of a detective, an experienced detective, to historical evidence, if we can call it that. I also thought that was very well done, because he reads Thomas More. He reads Sir Thomas More's account and doesn't think until the end of it to look and see how old Thomas More was when he wrote that book. And if there's one thing that a cop loves, it's secondhand evidence. And that's like the turning point of the momentum of the entire novel. And I love the notion of applying tried and true detective skills to history, because I've read enough history now to where I think that Tay is absolutely right and that all historians are mad, because some of the things you will read in historical accounts of things, you don't really seriously do not know how the writers of those things got there.
Well, I think this has been a fascinating discussion, and I would like to say I hope it will encourage people to not only reread Josephine Tay, but think about applying her to today, because I think one of the great things about her is that her books, while they are of their time, really work just as well today.
Yeah.
And that I mean, I'm very much a part of the British Library Crime Classics, and some of those books clearly are rooted, in their time and don't update all that well. So you read them as a period piece, and that's fine. But I think with Tay, you can read her in a very modern context, and what she says and what she writes, works equally well and can be reinterpreted today.